All right, welcome. Have you ever just stopped and wondered what is it that makes us tick? You know, that invisible force that gets us to climb a mountain or learn a new language, or honestly, just get out of bed some mornings. Well, today we're going to dive deep into the surprising science behind motivation to figure out that one huge question: what makes us do the things we do? Let's get into it. So let's start with this. Why on earth do people try to do things that seem, well, impossible? Or at the very least, just plain bizarre to the rest of us? The answer, as you're about to see, isn't always what you'd think. I mean, take a look at this guy, Suresh Chauhan. He holds a whole bunch of Guinness World Records for some of the weirdest stuff imaginable. We're talking the longest escalator ride ever, running the farthest distance while carrying a brick, hosting the longest radio show without stopping. The list just goes on and on. It's kind of mind-boggling, right? So you have to ask, what could possibly drive someone to do all of that? What's the end game? Well, if you ask Suresh, he says he does it all to raise money for charity. And that, right there, brings us to the most basic way we think about motivation: the split between what comes from inside us and what comes from the world around us. So yeah, this leads us right into the first big idea for today. It's the classic way of looking at things, the difference between what drives us from the inside versus what pulls us from the outside. It seems simple, but it's a really powerful place to start. So let's break these two down. On one hand, you've got intrinsic motivation. Think internal. This is the drive that comes from within you. You do something just because you love it, you enjoy the challenge, or it just feels meaningful to you. And then, on the other side, there's extrinsic motivation. Think external. This is when the push comes from the outside world. We're talking rewards, money, grades, or even just trying to make someone else happy. If you want a really powerful example of intrinsic motivation, you gotta hear the story of William Kamkwamba. When he was just 15, his family couldn't afford school anymore. So what did he do? He went to the library, taught himself physics, and built a working windmill out of scrap metal to power his family's home. Nobody told him to do it. There was no prize. It was just this incredible internal fire to learn and to help. So, okay, we've got this neat and tidy model, right? Inside versus outside. But does life really fit into such clean little boxes? Is it always that simple? I think you know the answer to that. Because out here in the real world, those lines between inside and outside motivation can get super, super blurry. And this is where it starts to get really fascinating. Let me give you a real-world puzzle. In Sri Lanka, you'll find a lot of students going into really tough fields like science or engineering. And often, it's not because it was their childhood dream, it's what their parents wanted or what society expects. Now that sounds like a textbook case of extrinsic motivation, doesn't it? But here's the kicker. They don't just phone it in. They work incredibly hard, they compete fiercely, and they stick with it. And see, this is where that simple model starts to fall apart. If it's only about outside pressure, why would they work so incredibly hard? Why that level of dedication? It just doesn't quite add up. So this tells us we need a better map, something a little more sophisticated to really get what's going on under the surface. And that brings us to a much better way of looking at all this: the difference between actions that are autonomous versus actions that are controlled. Okay, so let's unpack this. Controlled motivation is pretty much what we've been talking about. It's when you feel pushed or pulled by outside forces, rewards, punishments, or that pressure to not disappoint someone. But autonomous motivation is the really cool part. It's not just about doing what you love from the start. It also includes goals that may be started externally, but that you since accepted, endorsed, and truly made your own. You've chosen to own it. Think about our student again. They might start studying science because their parents are pushing them. That's controlled. But somewhere along the way, maybe they discover they're actually pretty good at it. Or maybe they have a great teacher who sparks a genuine curiosity. Suddenly, it's not about their parents anymore. They've found a real passion for it. That motivation has shifted from controlled to autonomous. It's theirs now. So now that we have this better map, let's look under the hood a bit. Psychologists have come up with a few big theories to explain the fundamental engines that actually power all our behaviors. Let's take a quick look at 4 of the biggest ones. First up, there's need theory. This one's pretty intuitive. The idea is that we're all motivated to fulfill certain needs. This goes from the super basic stuff like food and shelter, all the way up to more complex social needs like feeling like you belong or that you're accomplishing something meaningful. An unmet need basically creates an itch that we're motivated to scratch. Next, we have drive theory. This one is all about getting back to a state of balance. It says that motivation comes from an internal state of tension or irritation, a drive that we want to get rid of. Think about being really hungry or thirsty. That feeling is the drive, and you're motivated to eat or drink just to make that uncomfortable feeling go away. The goal isn't the food, it's the relief. And this really shows you the core idea. As that internal tension, that drive, goes up, so does our motivation to do something about it. It pushes us into action to get back to our comfortable baseline. The stronger the drive, the more urgently we act. It's all about getting back to a state of equilibrium, what scientists call homeostasis. But what about when you're not trying to get rid of a bad feeling? That's where incentive theory comes in. This theory flips things around. It says we aren't just pushed from within, we're also pulled by things from the outside. This explains why you might see a delicious-looking cake and want a slice, even if you're not hungry at all. The cake itself, the external incentive, is what's doing the motivating. It's the classic carrot on a stick. And finally, we get to cognitive theory. This one puts our brain right in the center of the action. The idea here is that we're not just robots responding to needs and incentives. We're thinking creatures. Our motivation comes from our thoughts, our expectations, our beliefs about what we can achieve. We weigh the pros and cons, we learn from the past, and we set goals for the future. It's motivation that's born from conscious, rational thought. Okay, wow, so we've gone from inside versus outside all the way to these big psychological theories. But so what? Why does any of this actually matter in our day-to-day lives? Well, it turns out it matters a lot. Seriously, understanding this stuff is like having a superpower. Marketers use these principles to figure out why you buy what you buy. Great teachers use them to create classrooms where kids actually want to learn. And in the workplace, it's everything. It's the key to keeping people productive and happy, to being a good leader, and to building a team that's genuinely fired up to come to work. So I want to leave you with this one final thought, a question to turn back on yourself. Now that you've got a better sense of the forces that push and pull all of us, take a second to think about your own life, your own goals. Knowing a little bit more about what drives you, what are you going to do next?